Afternoon, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. First item on the work session is a request for transfer of Market House Co-op space to the Hagerstown Fire Department. Chief?
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I promise if you don't ask me too many difficult questions that I don't have a reasonable answer for, I'll be out of here in my allotted time. You may recall about a year ago, I had made a request to encumber the available Market House space and convert it to a combination downtown fire station and fire department headquarters administrative offices. We thought the farmers market was doing well enough that that probably wasn't a viable idea. So we have a modified proposal in front of you today based upon the fact that I believe I have this right, the co-op space vacated within the last 30 days. So nonetheless, if you'll let me run through the slideshow, the only other piece of information you should have in your packet is the original request to the city administrator to make this request. So you're looking at the Church Street elevation from two different angles here. Farmers Market and HFD headquarters share a building that, from the recordation I can find, was constructed in 1928. And it was constructed with the intent of being the farmers market. At some point, and I can't determine when, the space that the fire department currently occupies was reassigned to the now non-existent signal department. When they vacated that space, the fire department moved in, and then significant renovations occurred largely through in-kind services of Public Works and the fire department. And the best I could tell, that occurred in about 1989, 1990. So what we house there currently are the shift commander and aide, our shift-wide commander and his aide that work 24-hour shifts, the fire marshal, 3 deputy fire marshals, the fire chief, and our executive administrative assistant. And honestly, we're out of space, which I hope some of the photographs here will show you. This is the west side elevation looking from the Jonathan Street end of the parking lot. I don't have a pointer on this thing, I don't believe, but nonetheless, it's almost a 50-50 split. To the left is the fire department headquarters and offices. To the right is the farmers market. The existing facility is crowded and dated, as you can see. We obviously, starting with top left, that is the battalion commander's vehicle. There's a single bay door that exits onto Church Street. The next picture is closed space. That's where our quartermaster supplies are, SCBA repair shop, and what used to be a vehicle maintenance facility that we've converted for air cascade, et cetera. Bottom left is the cubicles that occupy the office space for our officers, the kitchen living quarters for the shift commander and staff assigned there 24 hours. And then it's interesting to note, because this facility does have a backup generator for the entire building and is fully sprinklered, the city-wide phone infrastructure server box, Scott, help me out there if I'm incorrect about that.
It's a phone switch.
Phone switch is what I'm showing there in Julie's office. So the existing co-op space occupies the southeast quadrant of the Market House. I have the square footage elsewhere here. I believe it's 2,500 square feet. And if you subtract the stuff in the bottom right photo, stairwell, entrance doors off the alley, et cetera, that occupies about 400. So we would gain 2,100 net square feet to our existing 9,000. It's easily connected and secured to the HFD, although that is not reflective in that photograph. But essentially, we are looking towards the fire department space on that mural wall, and the stairwell you just saw is on the right. 2 asks for Mayor and Council today. 1 is to assign the existing co-op space to the HFD. We would view that as semi-permanent. 2, approve the design work to build a phased plan for renovations. And I don't know if Michelle's in the audience, but it was certainly her idea that she believed that this is usable space for any city agency. It's no secret to this political group that we are still trying to acquire land around the city to accomplish this under the best of circumstances, and it's covered in the memo. We believe that's 24 or 48 months out. So this would be approached in a concept of renovating it for fire department use today, carry us 2 or 3 years, and then probably reassigning that space to any other city agency looking for that space. One of the ideas that surfaced during all this conversation was maybe a drive-up bill payment window on the alley side to eliminate some of the security issues that we have on the first floor of City Hall. We're requesting approval funding for Phase 1 design work with FY20 funds. We will show you some of those numbers here in a minute. This is just another view of that engine bay that was the signal departments. That's our utility vehicle equipped with a plow right now. And then begin Phase 1 construction as soon as the budget allows, which I would have to assume would be July 1. I reached out to the city engineer, and he reached out to Scott Bowen. These numbers belong to Scott. So we're talking about a renovated space of approximately 12,000 square feet. If it was interior renovations only, they believe they could do it for about 150 a square, with another 7.5% architectural fees. If we did interior and exterior, which is what is recommended, a portion, if you look at, and I can go back to the picture, I call that a lantern roof. The very top of the lantern roof was replaced recently, but the two lower sides are in need of replacement. One of the reasons we're before you today. So we want to correct our legacy workspace issues and allow transfer of this to other departments as needed. We would estimate that we would be there at least 3 years. Potential funding sources, we do have in this year's CIP budget $530,000. Proposed FY21 in a variety of projects is another $1.5 million. That is not approved yet. It's proposed, subject to your approval, of course. And then in operating, we have spent down building maintenance money to $2,500 this year. We're asking for another $50,000 for maintenance effort after July 1. So 1 to 2 budget cycles would be preferred. And we would first kind of in phases, this is how we would lay it out. Gym and service equipment moved from the existing space to this co-op space with little or no renovation there. Renovate new office space for staff, and then of course lastly renovate living space, ADA compliant restrooms, and remaining office space for the rest of the fire department staff. I've been in contact with the finance director, the city administrator, the city engineer, and the public works director, none of which object to this proposal. So with that, I would simply open the floor to questions and comments, and you know, we have made some cosmetic improvements in terms of painting and floor tile, place of carpet, that kind of thing, but substantially, there haven't been substantial renovations since the early 90s.
I'm good with it. I agree that you're really praying for it. I've seen it, I've toured it. Yeah, I understand the need, for sure. Yeah.
I'm fine, man. Just a couple of comments. I mean, I've been down to your office. I've seen the working space constraints. I mean, that's a big number, $2 million on a building that you may get a couple years of, you know, life cycle use out of, without, I mean, the effort, at least in my mind, the effort thus far has been to look at improved efficiencies of locations of resources. And I feel like we're spending a lot of money to not get there. I mean, that's $2 million is just, that's a big.
So I guess Councilmember Howard would respond to that is that we fully intend to continue to do that merger and consolidation. I think that's the only way out to right-size this fire department and put political leadership for the city in a position to manage fire department resources. I think there's other ways to do that. We have struggled with acquiring land, and we do not have a offer yet. There's been progress made, and in fact, in our previous meeting, I received a text from the owner of the property that we've discussed previously on South Potomac Street, that they expect to have an asking price maybe by the end of this week.
I just have difficulty when we're talking about $2 million for a building that has accessibility issues. It has site constraints. It has parking issues. It has issues associated with, adequate maneuvering of necessary equipment, for a department such as yours in it. And the building is of an age that we have already exhausted, a degree of funds into. My concern is we're gonna spend this $2 million and then, 2 years down the road, we're going to be having this discussion about doing the thing that we should do, which is move on from this, and that's an expensive, stopgap.
I think the general belief of staff, and I won't speak for anyone else, but is that that building will not sell on a competitive negotiated sale list unless it's given away. And therefore, it becomes a prime opportunity for a city to prepare space if a city needs to expand any other department, any other relocate resources out of City Hall, whatever they may be. Two primary, well, I would say three things. When Scott Bowen evaluated the building, his words directly were, it's an old building, but it has good bones. So I think that's meaningful. Then it's a matter of, well, what do you want it to be moving forward? So whether we would intend to spend all that money, we just provided the numbers that were offered to us. I don't know. I've renovated a house here in the city in 1992, and I spent just under $100 a square foot at that time for a high-end renovation. So I don't know that we could do it for less than $150 a square foot, just to be realistic, and I wouldn't try to market that any other way. I'm not a subject matter expert there.
I don't disagree on the number. I just think that we're spending it at the wrong place.
We would still very much intend to relocate. So if there's value to the city in renovating this building, this provides an opportunity to do that now. We're gonna have to do something. We have failed infrastructure in the form of HVAC stuff. The rest of it, could we stretch it out another year or two? Probably. We've added, as you know, a third deputy fire marshal. We need office space there, and that staff has lived without important features like an interview room to interrogate suspects. We live without any kind of conference space. Not that that's the end of the world, but honestly, it's 2020, and we would expect to be able to have those kind of resources available to us. The bathrooms are a larger issue. They look like something you would find in your house. There's only a single shower shared amongst male, female staff, et cetera. ADA compliance, those kind of things just need to happen, regardless of who occupies it, whether it's the fire department or somebody else. So.
So it would have to be renovated in order to, right?
Well,
If you intend to keep it.
If we,
Would you-
yes.
Well, isn't that the intention, is to keep it?
It is on the competitive negotiated sale list as far as I know, but I'm not aware of any offers.
It's not.
Oh, it's not? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
So you feel that there could be a number on this land on South Potomac by the end of this week?
I believe so. That's, I'm just responding to the text I received when we were over at the county office.
They have not been the easiest to get back to.
I've been dogging them every week
Yeah.
for a year and a
I
half.
understand, but
Yeah.
I'm wondering, do we make this decision tonight and put these plans in place? Or do we hold off for a couple weeks to find out where we're at there on South Potomac Street before we decide to, invest $2 million plus into an expansion that may only be 24 months?
I certainly can't object to that. It makes good common sense to me, Mayor. So if you would rather defer, have me back as soon as I have a number, I'll certainly share that with the
I
administrator.
would rather move faster on South Potomac, if possible, than, give you a stopgap of 24 months in some place that we could spend that money.
I will say this is new information in terms of when I put this proposal together, I'd let them know that, hey, time's up. We got to move on here. And they have made some progress. They've just been very, very reluctant to put a price on what they think the property's worth. And notwithstanding corporate bureaucracy, the people making those decisions are in Indiana or Ohio or somewhere else. It's not local.
Right.
So,
So we reschedule to revisit this again in maybe 30 days.
absolutely,
Yeah, that's good timing that they said that, so, right?
it is.
Might be a good sign.
I mean, I just look at the moves that the department locations have made, in recent history, and the benefits that has, accrued, and then harken back to the presentation that you provided us of moves yet to make, and to me, I have felt then and now that I remain on board with those recommendations.
Fair enough. So I believe I'm scheduled, Donna, help me out, March 3rd for a presentation of an executive summary of a 5-year strategic plan. If you allow me to make modifications up to the last minute based on real information, I would say that's probably right in line with what the mayor's suggesting. So,
Sounds good.
thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Comprehensive rezoning review.
Hello. So we are here to review the final comprehensive rezoning package. We actually began our official review with Planning Commission last summer, so that's summer of 2019. They had their public review meeting and then decided to table the rezoning package until we pursued the comprehensive plan amendments, which involved changes to the future land use plan, and that has been adopted. So we are now back to the rezoning, and this is Planning Commission's final recommendation. So I provided you guys a copy of the presentation. I have a few extra slides actually to pass around before and it's just one page each.
Thank you, Scott.
Okay, so just to start off, comprehensive rezonings are generally based on the future land use plan. So this is the future land use plan that we just recently amended last month. So this reflects all of the most accurate information. Just what the city does is recommend certain uses for certain areas, and that's how we decide to rezone future properties. Here we just have some future land use data. It just kind of shows the distribution of residential and commercial uses in the city by acreage and by percentage. As you can see, it is mostly residential. And again, this is with the updated or the amended future land use plan. So first section of properties that are being rezoned are directly in response to the future land use plan. So if the future land use plan recommends certain use, we are rezoning it to reflect that. So these are the first group of properties, and I'll just go ahead and go through these one by one. So the first is Potomac Maple. It's currently zoned commercial general and is recommended to be zoned to neighborhood mixed use. That's just because commercial is not well suited here due to the mixture of residential and commercial uses. Actually, right now, most of these properties are not conforming with the commercial zoning district, so rezoning it to a mixed-use district would make all of those properties conforming. And then for the East Baltimore rezoning, it's a very similar situation, except part of it is residential office and the rest is commercial general, and that all is proposed to be rezoned to mixed use, again, because it's better suited for the area, and most of the properties would become conforming that are not conforming in the current zone. Then we have the north side of Hebb Road, which is currently zoned high-density residential, and the recommendation is to go to professional office mixed use. This property is adjacent to areas of non-residentially zoned land. It may lend itself better to business employment uses. And just to refresh everyone in the conversation we had on the south side of Hebb Road, that will remain high-density residential zoning and is not up for a rezoning in this package based on the future land use amendment. Next, we have the site on Burhans and Church. It's currently zoned industrial restricted, and the proposal is to go to commercial general. As you can see, they're very narrow properties, and the former use has been abandoned. Redevelopment for industrial uses would be difficult, so the idea is that commercial general is just a better fit for this site. Next, we have the Linwood Tract, which is currently zoned medium-density residential, and the recommendation is to go to industrial general. All the housing authority's plans have been abandoned on that site, so the idea is to kind of allow expansion for the nearby Hagerstown Business Park with an IG zoning. Next, we have the Daub Farm Tract. As you can see, most of it is currently zoned commercial regional, aside from that eastern parcel, which is professional office mixed use. The recommendation is to rezone that parcel to commercial regional, to make the entire tract consistently one zone and just to allow for maximum flexibility in that area. Then we have this portion of the South End Shopping Center. It's currently zoned commercial general, and the recommendation is to go to industrial general. Great Southern Wood is currently using that, or will be using that parking lot for trailer parking, which is an industrial use, so we would just extend the zoning district to cover that area. To better fit, I guess, what's currently being used there. And then we have the Hagerstown Industrial Park, which is currently industrial restricted and is recommended to go to industrial general. The restricted industrial use currently is inconsistent with the character of this park and the IG zoned Hagerstown Business Park. So the idea is just it better fits the uses that are already there. It's a little bit more lenient than the IR district is currently.
Before you go to the next one, can you explain a little further when you indicate that the way the Hagerstown Business Park functions now is more akin to IG than IR?
I think because there aren't just the restrictive industrial uses there, there's a lot more that goes on in that area, and that zone doesn't quite fit how I guess it was intended to be. I think the idea is that to match the industrial park to the business park zoning, since they have similar uses.
I think maybe my question is specific to the difference between IR and IG as it applies to exterior uses. Because it appears the Hagerstown Business Park is largely made up of activities, commercial interests that are more interior-oriented activities, and so I'm curious to what degree that may change by changing that designation from IR to IG. Can we expect to experience an increase in the ability of exterior activities, more like the couple of other uses that are just outside of the park over there?
The Hagerstown Business Park is the one off of Burhans, and that one is currently industrial general. And then the Hagerstown Industrial Park, which is off of Frederick, is the one that's industrial restricted.
Okay.
And so that, to me, never made a lot of sense. Hagerstown Business Park feels like an office park to me, and that's industrial general. The Hagerstown Industrial Park is much more industrial feeling, and that's industrial restricted.
Okay.
So we're just gonna put them to be both the same. IG and IG.
Okay.
Okay.
And then the next property is the Zion Parsonage. This was actually a mistake created previously when delineating zoning district lines. So the zoning district line goes right down the side of the building. So we would just be extending or adding that parcel into the mixed-use district. It's currently zoned residential office. And then the last property for this group is the property on Potomac and Northern. It's currently zoned professional office mixed use, and the recommendation is to go to commercial local. And that's just kind of to provide a buffer between the commercial and regional to the north, and then all that residential area across the street there. And then the next group of properties are kind of to clean up the map, whether they were mistakes that were made before in drawing zoning lines or just create consistencies throughout the zoning map. So I'll go through those as well. The first is 307 and 309 Summit. It's currently zoned commercial local, and we would be rezoning it to RMED, or medium density residential. And those are homes there, so that's just a consistency to create residential zoning there. And then we have 300 to 334 Summit, which is currently zoned CG, or commercial general, and the recommendation is to go to commercial local. To just better fit the surrounding zone and create a more consistent commercial local zone in that area of the city. And then we have 329 South, which is a house, I believe, that's currently zoned industrial restricted. So again, just correcting a mistake to add that to the residential office zoning. And then we have properties on Fairground Ave. It's 11 through 19 and 24 through 32. They're currently zoned commercial general, and those are all houses as well. So the recommendation would be to go to medium density residential to just correct the mistake that had been made previously. And you can see the Potomac Maple zoning there in the proposed as well, as right next to that property. And then this is correcting another mistake. That sliver, the parcel behind those three parcels is currently zoned professional office mixed use. It should be zoned commercial general to match those three parcels, so just to correct that mistake there. And then the last group of properties are properties that we're going to be rezoning to the new institutional zone that we just created. So this is largely residentially zoned properties that are more campus style in nature, that kind of have or have always had an institutional use, and the idea is to preserve that institutional use into the future by creating a zoning district for those properties. So I list them all here. I'll go through them quickly. It's mostly city parks and schools. There's a couple other institutional uses in there, the YMCA, Potomac Center, county buildings, and then more city parks and city property as well. So here's the existing zoning and proposed institutional zoning. I know that's really small, you probably can't see it, which is why I passed around these new screenshots just showing more zoomed in areas of each corner of the city and those bigger parcels there that are proposed to be institutionally zoned. And it's that pale red pinkish color that you see on the map. So this is the top part of the city here, and then here are the last two screenshots for that institutional zone. And as you can see, they're just bigger tracts of land that are kind of more campus style for an institutional use. And then to review the process, Planning Commission did their public review in June. They tabled it, we pursued the amendments, now we're returning to Mayor and Council for the rezoning. We have a public hearing scheduled February 25th. And the record remains open for 10 days after that. We'll be accepting public input on the rezoning package. And then after that comes the introduction and adoption of the rezoning. Does anyone have any questions?
Okay, thank you. Land Management Code Amendments. Follow up.
Good evening. We had our public hearing on January 28th. The record was kept open for 10 days. During that time period, we received two sets of comments. One was from a property owner on Cazenove Avenue, asking for some consideration associated with zoning regulations with backyard fences. And then the other was a package of materials provided by Jim Daub and Jim Castillo, representatives of the Daub property over there on the very eastern edge of town. They provided a rather thick package of material, but if you go through it, actually, there's a number of pages there where they actually don't make comment. They kind of copied the individual reports. And if it's maybe a 3 or 4 page report, only like 1 or 2 pages may have had actually comments on them. So that's pretty much all I have to present to you. I'm mostly here to answer any questions that you may have.
Yeah, I want to address Steve Wilson's comments that he sent in. And I believe that his, and this isn't new to you, of course, we've had this conversation for months now.
Right.
But I believe that his whole problem with this is that the Board of Zoning Appeals shall not grant variances to the requirements of this paragraph. Because what you're saying is that this is the way it is, and there's no exceptions for anybody for any reason, and that just doesn't, you know, and I mean, I don't think that's how anybody actually governs anymore. I mean, there's always a exception to a rule for a reason.
Right. As a practical matter, to answer the question, could that provision be lifted and allow people to apply for variance? And the short answer is yes, that it can happen. When this was brought to the Planning Commission's attention, we looked at it in detail, and the thought was that it creates a lot more problems than it solves, essentially, because when somebody applies for a variance, there are certain criteria in the zoning ordinance that they have to meet in order for a variance to be granted. Things like self-created hardship, things like that. And in evaluating the situation, the thought is most people, under most circumstances, will not be able to get past the thresholds in the state-mandated criteria for a variance based solely on a building material. So Planning Commission's recommendation is to leave the ordinance alone, because the thought is that if the provision is lifted, we're giving folks a level of false comfort that, oh, well, I just want this type of fence, therefore I'm gonna go to the BZA and get a variance, when there are certain criteria that have to be met. And if one of the first questions is going to be from the BZA, if they're doing the job properly, is, well, can you have some other type of fence that the ordinance doesn't prohibit? And in almost every case, the answer is gonna be yes. They may not want that particular type, or they might be taking cost into factors. But the thought is that by lifting that provision, doesn't mean necessarily that somebody is going to get a variance. They still have a rather uphill battle to meet the standards that are set forward by state law as far for meeting a variance goes. And if you're basing it just on a material selection, that's a very tough threshold to meet.
Let's say that I want to put up a fence around my backyard. Okay? And it has to be high enough so that that Biggie Smalls doesn't jump over it. Okay? I can put up an 8-foot fence, wooden fence.
A 6-foot fence.
Okay, a 6-foot wooden fence that would look more like a stockade. Or I could put up a 5-foot chain link fence, which the Planning Commission perceives as being like a prison fence. I've worked in a prison. Those fences are usually 30 feet tall, and then with concertina wire on top. They're not 5 feet. And, you know, we'll use my house as an example. Along the back alley, if I have water that runs constantly after rain, or water sits there because there's no drainage, and if I put up a wooden fence, that wooden fence doesn't last as long because it eats away because of Mother Nature. And I believe that that is a hardship that, not self-created, because Mother Nature's creating that hardship. You see what I'm getting at? So, I believe that there's always an exception to a rule, and when you use language like this that says shall not grant variances, I mean, then there is no room there for an exception to a rule.
I tend to agree with that. I think it's a little restrictive. And I see what you're saying is, you know, you still have to go through a process. But I would be okay with taking the very restrictive language out.
Do you define what chain link is?
We use the common understanding of it, the interwoven wire that we don't have a definition, no, that's the short answer. But for the most part, everybody understands what a chain link fence is.
I'm just saying you can buy the fence at Lowe's that's actually linked, that's used for farm fields. And it's linked in a manner where it's wrapped around, but it forms more of squares than it does the diamonds. I'm just curious if someone can make that argument.
I don't think there's a specific prohibition in the ordinance against that type of
I
fence.
think it's more height.
Yeah, the issue is really more the height. So everybody can have some background on it. In the residential zoning districts, in a rear yard and in a side yard that is not up against a side street, you can have any type of fence that you want up to 6 feet in height, except chain link fences are capped at 4 feet in height. And that provision has been on the books for a number of years. And it came about because we had received some zoning permits, if I remember correctly, for some 6-foot tall chain link fences that folks built in their backyards, and we actually got complaints about them. And when this was discussed by the planning commission, one of the things that we did is we, on a whiteboard along the side of the room, we drew out a 4-foot, a 5-foot, and a 6-foot line. And keep in mind that some properties are larger than others, other ones are closer. If you're looking out your window and your neighbor's side property line is 3 feet from your house, do you want to see a 3-foot tall, or a chain link fence, depending on the topography or the height of the individual fence, a chain link fence 3 feet outside of your kitchen window or your dining room window? And the thought is that amongst the planning commission members, as a general principle, the variance issue aside, fences, chain link fences over 4 feet in height in a side and rear yard is generally not an appropriate thing in the residential zoning districts.
I agree.
And that's aside from the variance issue.
You said 4 feet, right?
4 feet, yes,
So is that 4 feet from the ground?
yes.
Yeah, I know my neighbor has a chain link fence, and I sure as the devil wouldn't like to find out it was 6 feet high. I just,
Well, and we're not, and again, Lou.
no, I know, Bob, but
I don't
I'm,
wanna, I don't wanna look out, my next door neighbor has a 4-foot chain link fence that separates our properties, okay? Right outside my kitchen window, all right? If it was 5 feet, I wouldn't find it offensive. I don't know what height I would find it offensive at, but I know I wouldn't find it offensive at 5 feet. So I just, when there are circumstances, and although self-made, because this individual that we're discussing here, without discussing it, has a dog that can jump, and he's got, his topography is hilly, so that dog can launch from the top of the hill and clear a 4-foot fence without any problem. 5-foot fence, not so much. So when I talk about circumstances, that there's always an exception, there are 5-foot fences in that neighborhood.
Yes, that was brought to our attention, and if I remember correctly, what I found was there was 1 or 2 that were installed prior to, a number of years ago, prior to the change in the regulations. And then there's 1 or 2 that we could find they were relatively recent installs that we could find no zoning certificate for. So if we received a complaint about them, they would be a zoning violation. So I think there's like 3 or 4 of them in that immediate area, if I remember correctly.
I think we're making a mountain out of a molehill, is what we're doing here. When we talk about a difference of 12 inches from 4 feet to 5 feet on a chain link fence in a backyard. Not a front yard, not a side yard, in a backyard. So, I just think, again, I think when you put language in that says no variance shall be granted, that is definitely, restricted to the point.
I can look at you, Mayor, and I can tell you, I can envision, I think about Hamilton Boulevard and Oak Hill and the alleys that run behind the properties. You have the back of an alley bounded by an alley. And hedges. I'm assuming there also is a limit of 4 feet, is that right?
In a rear yard for a hedge, no.
No, for a chain link fence there.
Oh, yes, in the
Okay.
entire rear yard, it's 4 feet high.
Well,
Right.
that's
So-
citywide, yeah. no matter
No,
what
I
it's-
mean, I can comprehend that people should be permitted in certain circumstances. I can't say, I cannot see a side yard, I cannot, but in certain circumstances, again, I think of those alleys where I go back there and there's 8-foot shrubs on either side of the alley as you go back, and I don't know that that would be a problem.
One of the things, and actually, Mr. Metzner, in his description, actually brought up a parallel issue, and that is under certain circumstances. One of the things that we looked at, because when the staff and when your planning commission receives a request from this body, we do take it very seriously. And one of the things we even looked at in order to find a way to accommodate this without creating other problems was we checked with the city attorney to see if we could actually write a separate set of fence variance criteria. And the direction we received from the city attorney was, no, there's one set of criteria for all variances. It's set forward in state code in general terms. And that's what we got. We can't have two separate and distinct sets of variance criteria. So we looked at every angle possible to figure out a way to loosen this up without creating parallel problems.
Yeah, I think we just need to pick a height, like that the majority is comfortable with, and leave it at that.
Well, I think it's important for you to show the body what 4 feet, 5 feet, and 6 feet look like, because when we did it in the planning commission, when you looked at 6 feet, all of us were, like, it was unanimous, you know, when you saw it on the white, it's very high.
Well, if,
How tall were you showing?
Not 6 feet,
Okay.
but not very tall.
I mean,
Yeah, I'm good with 5, not 6.
as a permitted use.
Rear and side.
I'm good with 5 too.
I'm good with 4.
I'm good with 4 on the sides. I could live with 5 in the backyard under the right circumstances.
I'm also good with there being the potential for variances and they meet the requirements.
To go up to
Which
6.
is gonna be difficult. I mean,
Yeah.
then if BZA is doing their
Yeah, I'm not
job,
there.
then they'll
I mean,
almost,
5 is fine.
it would never get approved.
It,
Right?
it would be very difficult.
difficult. So we
Merely
can
for a
lift the
building
variance.
material, it's very difficult to get a height variance strictly
Right.
for building
And
material.
just
Change the language,
frustrate
but-
everybody else around by
Right.
asking for a variance and never getting it.
Exactly.
And that was one of the planning
And then
commission's
wondering why
concerns.
you had the right to even ask for it if they weren't gonna give it to you.
if you change it to
Because they
5,
don't
you don't
change-
have to worry about a variance.
I'm fine with changing it to 5 in the back.
In the back, yeah.
So my backyard is someone's side yard, so,
So that means you could do a 5-foot tall
right,
fence in their side yard.
correct.
Yeah, see, that's my
So,
problem.
right, so
My problem
neighborhood,
is,
that's not gonna work.
my problem is allowing that fence that, you know, again, I gave the example of the alleys. There is no property owner adjoining the other property owner. There's a road or an alley separating them. They're never gonna go back on the end of their property and find a 6-foot fence, ever. They're gonna find an alley there. And I don't have a problem with that height that is not abutting a neighboring property. But if it's abutting a neighboring property, you're right. It could be my backyard and my neighbor's side yard,
Right.
very easily. And my neighborhood is a good example with houses that have huge corner lots, hardly any backyard, and they start putting, I don't like the idea if it's adjoining, abutting your neighbor's property.
So, I'm just curious, because like I said,
But you'd be fine with a 6-foot wooden fence.
That's what's being allowed right now, yeah, yeah. And I had that,
Privacy on both
listen,
sides.
I have that. I have that. My neighbors had a 6 or 8-foot wooden fence on this side and a 4-foot chain link fence on this side. I'll take that wooden fence in a New York
So-
second.
Just so I'm clear, and I'm gonna ask this again, I can put a different type of metal fence up to 6 feet high.
That is correct, like there's.
Like a wrought iron.
Or there's aluminum tube ones that, simulate a wrought iron.
What about like the
yes.
horse fence where it's 2 by 4 inch squares?
I'm not familiar
Are
with that.
you
too.
You go to Lowe's, you buy it,
Like
it's,
farm-
yeah.
like farm fence.
And I go to
Farm
Lowe's and
fencing.
get 6 foot tall galvanized farm fence and put it up around my property.
Not all the way around, but in the back,
And down the sides.
as long
Well,
as,
sorry.
That's that's what I'm trying to figure out is what we're opposed to. Is it because it's metal? Is it because of how it
No,
looks?
I think it's a
Is
chain
it
link
because
fence,
of,
the way it looks, and I think you raise a good example to the extreme of bringing up a point that's something that has never occurred in this community.
Well-
Of people wanting to put up galvanized fencing. I mean, I understand your point, Kristen, and I also understand staff saying, everybody knows what a chain link fence is. And that's, if somebody comes in and wants to say this isn't a chain link fence, I'm sure there are plenty of people who could address that issue.
that's why I asked the question, because clearly when you go to Lowe's and you buy that product, it is not a chain link fence.
Right.
But it is the same color, it is the same building material, it's just shaped differently.
More like a chicken wire fence or a high gauge chicken wire kind of thing.
Either, well, it comes in any of that. It comes in 1 by 1s, it comes in 2 by 4, it comes in 4 inch by 4 inch. Yeah. Yes, or you can buy them in the 4 by 4 squares, which what you see on the outfalls of stormwater management ponds for the water to flow through. I'm just curious, because the 4 by 4 square, they're actually wrapped. And you can get that, you can put it up, in 6 foot height. That's what I'm wondering about. Now, you can get those other ones in green and black, instead of having it, but you can also get powder coated, black chain link fence. That's what I'm trying to figure out is what we're opposed to. If it were all green or if it were all black, would that make a
No,
difference?
To me, it doesn't make a difference. To me, my experience in the world is, if you want to see rundown fences, go look at chain link fences. That's the ones that are gonna look like they've been up there for 30
Which
years.
is why we
Man.
said that you can't put them in your front
And
yard.
I will tell you, in my neighborhood, the chain link fences, by and large, look better over the time that I've been there than the wooden fences.
And the wooden fences that are broken out halfway
Leaning
and fall
and
over.
pickets are broken. So that's what I'm trying to figure out is,
And again,
don't get me wrong, I
4 foot,
would not want a 6 foot
No.
chain link
a
fence
4
along
foot
my
chain
side
link
yard.
fence as opposed to a 5 foot
Me
chain link
personally.
fence is not, to me, hateful.
Is it-
Maybe
so-
4 foot to 6 foot,
Are we
yeah,
okay with
maybe
5
that
foot?
is, because then that's right in my height.
I'm still
I
with a 5
think
foot.
that Shelley hit it right, that we ought to have staff show us the differences between
4, 5,
4,
and
5,
We
and
can come
6.
back at a
Yes.
subsequent meeting and
Absolutely.
provide some
Yeah.
additional analysis for you.
Please.
That's,
Yeah, bring in 4 foot and 5 foot and 6 foot pieces of chain link fence, and
all
we'll
you
stack
have to
them
do
up
is
on
like
the
show
wall.
us on a
Yeah.
whiteboard. It's
Yeah.
really simple, and you'll see the visual, see the optics.
Okay, that's
But the planning commission's objection is that the 6 foot looks institutional, at what point?
I believe the feedback from the planning commission was anything above 4 foot started looking institutional,
Commercial.
or commercial, yes.
But I could go wrap my yard in 6 foot high orange blaze fence and not.
I'm 6 foot.
Okay, so it's a
I
fence your
think you
size
point
is
out an interesting point, and I don't think I can't think of a time where anybody's ever tried to do that,
It's
but
supposed to be, it's supposed to keep
you
people
raised
out.
an interesting question.
I've
Maybe
had that
that's a hole that needs to be filled.
That's why you put a fence
I
up.
don't know.
Okay.
So, but, it sounds like it's the consensus of the group that for us to come back and provide you more analysis of the situation so you can determine how to move forward.
I have no objection to 5 foot
Okay, we got 3 5 foot.
in a backyard,
neither.
in a backyard, not a side yard, a backyard.
So you don't have it.
No, we don't have it, no, because that negates the reason for the variance.
I think everybody should
Variance
take a
was
trip to Lowe's.
so that the dog didn't jump at the hill and clear the 4 foot fence.
In the backyard.
So what I'm hearing is,
But it's,
No,
I mean, but it runs
These are
between,
like 3.
it'd be 5 foot from the back of the house on both sides and the back. Are you okay with that?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay, there you go, we got it.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm sorry, I got a little lost there.
5 foot in a backyard.
Across the
from-
back.
No,
And
from
the
the
sides.
back of the house, back and across, 5 foot.
Okay, my development is going to be,
Don't the north, I mean, most backyard fences run from like the middle of the house.
Yeah, at the most. I mean, you can't put it in front, because it'd be in front. And we don't allow that.
And
I
would
just
that
can't-
be the
I
rear
can't-
setback, or would that be the
4 to 5
rear of the
feet, I
house?
don't see it.
Where
Exactly.
would
Let's
that
take
be
it from the
best?
rear of the house
and you'll see it.
to the back of the property and down the sides.
Yeah.
Just like anybody would put up a normal fence in the backyard.
Can we at least have it maybe like black or green or something, so it's not,
Plastic
Oh my
coated?
God.
no, seriously.
Well,
I
they
don't even
make,
want it. I don't even-
That wouldn't work. That's a setback, that wouldn't work. You want it from the back of the house. Okay.
I mean, I don't, how's that offensive?
Yes. Because in my.
And Kristen,
backyard-
you do know that with these changes, you can put a fence up in your front yard now.
Yes, you could do it anyway, as long
There
as
you go.
nobody complains.
Well, I mean, not legally, not until we just changed it this time.
No, it's been on the books for several years that you could do front yard
Right.
fences of certain types up to 3 feet in height.
Yeah.
That's been on the books for 6 or 7 or 8 years now, I believe.
Well, it must have when I was out of office, okay.
Yeah, I think it was, yeah,
Because when I was in office the last time, you couldn't do it.
yeah.
Well, my wife complained about that all
And,
the time.
and we have been looking over the years to find ways of loosening things up. There was a time where you can do any sort of front yard fencing. There was far more regulations on this kind of stuff than there is today.
You will get no complaint from me about not having a chain link fence in a front yard.
Okay.
Absolutely none, because they do tend to, at times, and I've seen neighborhoods, not here, but other neighborhoods, where
They're what?
they're falling down ugly,
Yep.
broken down, people have jumped over them.
Chain link fences in front yards over time can be very blighting.
Yes, they can.
So, what is the direction that I'm receiving from this body?
5 feet.
5 feet from the back of the house to the back of the property, all sides. And I think that covers it. I have dogs that can jump too, and my lot is hilly, which means my dog can probably, especially Casper, can launch from here and end up over in Pangbourne Park, or Woodland Way Park without any problem. That's why I built a dog run in my backyard. Yeah.
A what?
A dog run, so I didn't have to put an 8-foot fence up. Anything else on this for Steve?
So just so I'm clear, 5 foot from the back of the house to the back property line is okay for chain link?
Yeah, I'm good with that.
That's the will of the body here?
It's the will of 3 of them anyway.
Okay.
Oh, I am. You know, you guys know me in this fence thing, so.
Okay.
Thank you.
Very.
Up at your house.
Is there anything else on
Anything
the
else?
other,
The
the rest
body
of the
for
package?
Steve?
I don't have
Okay,
Thank you, sir.
thank you.
Oh, Kathy, update on the MRGA again.
I found these old maps in my file. Can never throw anything away. It shows these properties that we were talking about with the water requests outside the MRGA that we've had on hold for a while. So we were at the joint meeting with the county commissioners, which anybody who's been following us would know, to give them an update, everybody an update on the discussions been having about modifying the medium range growth area boundary. And during that discussion, I mentioned that we still have hanging out there some requests that Jill had brought forward to you for water on the west side of Greencastle Pike. We've already accommodated the ones that were up at the airport. And so these folks periodically ask for an update from us on when do you suppose this will be back before the mayor and council. And so we just wanted to see if you had a consensus of, if we get to the point where we have the county and the city agreeing, yes, the medium range growth boundary is going to adjust, but we know it's gonna take 6 months to modify the comprehensive plan. Are we gonna be comfortable with knowing that these areas, because we have been, every time the county's talked about priorities, we've made sure they understood these areas really need to be in there as well when you're talking about the Greencastle Pike. If we know that it's coming, would you be comfortable at that point continuing this request for the exception from the water and wastewater policy on the economic development side for those two?
I'm assuming there will not be in the new MRGA? Is that what you're saying?
The two, on the, one of the areas for sure that's gonna be talked about expanding is the enterprise zone area that they have on the west side of Greencastle Pike, and then other non-residentially zoned areas right along the Greencastle Pike in that area, between 40 and down to 70. We already have a pre-annexation agreement on most of this one up here, from when it was the Powers Estate back in the boom. Now it's called Heritage Hewitt, and so it still has it, but there's just a little bit of this one that doesn't have a pre-annexation agreement.
Are there some areas outside of the blue but inside of the red that are easy pickings to remove? Like when I look up just southwest of the airport district, the brown square, and you see you've got the red line outside and the blue line inside this space that looks pretty developed already.
That's Morgansville.
Right. I mean, is there the ability to flip a number of these to gain
Well, that's already out
anything?
and already developed.
I know, but what I'm saying is what we're trying to do is the commissioners want us to do all the red, we want to do the blue, and we're looking for areas to make the red match the blue. Right? And what I'm saying is there a reason we can't take an area like that and immediately flip that from red to blue?
And already developed residential land, what would we gain with that?
Well, you're compressing the blue.
Because,
The
right, it
blue
appears
line.
to me that what we're trying to do is shrink the red to match the blue, so that we can accommodate some of that area outside of the blue.
Well, the county's,
Word is supplying water there.
the county's not proposing any shrinkage of the red. It's a matter of whether the blue gets larger in some areas and smaller in
That's-
others.
To me, that's a non-starter. To me, there has to be areas
Oh, yeah, something's got to.
where
Well, the blue
red
is-
comes in and blue goes out.
Right, yes.
And
Yeah.
I'm just trying to identify areas like up here where it says Route 60, I guess, on the northeast corner, why you wouldn't look at that and bring it back into blue. Or a place like Morgansville. I'm just trying to look at areas and say, you know what, it's pretty simple that we're not gonna go to these areas, or we're not gonna provide any more than we already are.
What we have in these discussions is clear, pretty clear indication that economic development priorities for the county are up at the airports. They want it bigger, want the blue line bigger up there. And then in areas in the vicinity of 63, south of 40, they'd like it bigger over there. Now the challenge is what areas that are already inside the blue line have to come out so we have a balance.
Okay.
Because of the raw land demand there would be there for our utilities. And so the challenge, everybody will be like, oh, sure, bring all that in. The challenge is gonna be, all right, those guys that are in, they're coming out.
Right, and that gets to the issue that I don't see how we can make any decisions on anything until we as a body have decided who's going out. And that gets back, Mayor, to some of the discussions we had before about the Hebb Road folks. You know, we're doing the same thing here. When we take people who have invested and bought property with the thought process is that they're gonna be developing that property, and now we're telling them, no, you're not. what's the difference between downsizing zoning and telling people that we're moving them out of the growth area, and therefore, they always banked on the fact that they were gonna be able to get services from the
The
city?
fact that they're not already in the city. The fact that all this blue out here isn't in the city. You know, so I
Yeah,
got,
that's not our decision to make.
like, you look at this square out here just outside of the big blue blob, the square that isn't part of the big blue, I mean, that to me
No, that's a
gets
fine
chopped
answer,
off.
Christian, you answered my question.
I mean, that gets chopped off right away. I
Before
don't know what that is.
2008, we didn't have the blue line. We imposed the blue line in 2008. So people went through this
Because
at
the
that
state
point.
said
I
you
got a
have to
question
tell
about
us.
that. In the corner down here where the blue line is farther out than the red line is, why did we decide to go out with the MRGA farther than with the red line? It's in that corner on the top right.
Because it's inexable. In
Yeah,
other words,
it-
we're already there.
I mean, I understand, yeah, I understand.
There's no
but-
case where our blue line is larger than the red line. Sometimes it's the same, but we're never
Yeah,
larger.
on the east side it is.
Right.
Yeah, it's
That one little
northeast.
square. But we're already annexed out that far.
Okay.
Well, we're annexed out to
That's
the
the-
red line.
That's the area where the county plans to do a park.
That's a YMCA area.
Yeah. That's the northeast,
It's over by the concrete area,
what's it called?
concrete plant,
The bypass or whatever.
yeah.
The big road that's supposed to go
Yeah.
behind the YMCA.
Right, that's gonna connect that to.
Yeah, we did put that
Whitesburg.
because we knew the county planned to do a park there, and we knew it was just a matter of time before they popped the red line out to include the county park planned area. And so that's
Okay.
what that
No,
was.
I just
Yeah.
wanted to know why that, we were out further than they.
We asked them, is that still a plan at the time we were doing this? And they said yes.
Well, I know the plan is still to put the road in.
So the blue's where we are.
So we're not currently providing any water or sewer to Morgansville up here?
No, there's water up there.
Yeah.
And periodically, we will get infill lot requests up there. I don't know how many infill lots are left that aren't built.
So, I mean, why wouldn't that be in the blue then? I mean, if we're already providing service up there.
Well, in the circumstance where you have an infill lot, there is an exception in our water and wastewater policy that helps them already. That it was a lot that was approved in the past, and so we say.
That's all we
that's a
allocated for,
Single-family,
so-
two-family lot that was already approved, the implication is it was approved to get water at some point, particularly in areas where there's already water.
The blue would be way bigger than this if we had to account for that. Twice this size. Because we're already extended that far. And we're at the Pennsylvania line and the West Virginia
But
line.
isn't the point of the MRGA though to say, this is the map of where we can supply service? And if we're already supplying service, why wouldn't it be in, I'm not,
The other factor is, we were trying to be reasonable with a line where we knew people hoped they could get water, but we also have to figure how much water do we have to give? And with this blue line, we don't have water to give that full area,
And how expensive it is to get it there.
yeah. But what we did in this 2008, when we created this line, we said, well, we may not be able to provide full build-out inside that blue area, but we could supply what you might expect to see of growth in a 20-year time frame. And so that's why I made that line. If we made it down to exactly what we could provide at full build-out, it would be a much smaller area. But then at that point, we really are saying, we're deciding for you who's getting, in a very precise way, who's getting water and who's not getting water. This provides a little more flexibility as
Which
to
I
when.
believe we have to have.
Which is one, yeah. Because some folks, they're gonna be farms for the foreseeable future. They don't have plans. They may be in here, but they don't have plans. Other people do.
What do you want from us tonight, Kathy?
To just to revisit.
Yeah, but I think the county needs to define those 2 or 3 locations. We can't do anything until they say, here are the lines.
And they're working on that.
Yep.
Right, and that's, so really.
Yeah, I'm meeting with the county director again
And I
on
would just say
Thursday.
to the folks that are looking for our input, is when the county gets back and we can decide what these lines are, we'll give them the answer. I think that's one of the whole ideas, is keeping the pressure on.
It's been 7 months since this has been, and they're still out there, and we just wanted to hear that.
Just let them talk to the county.
Okay. Anything else for Kathy or Jim?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
The last thing is request from Hagerstown Neighborhood Development Partnership to continue the rent subsidy for 21 to 23 East Franklin Street.
There was a request from Vicky Bender, HNDP, as far as the rent subsidy. There appeared to be some interest from council to discuss whether this rent subsidy was be continued or not. This is the opportunity. Al's here as a member of the board of directors of HNDP.
Yes.
If you have any questions for him, and I'll let.
Yeah, we are being requested by the new landlord, WLR, to enter into a 5-year lease. And we had been paying rent for the last year under a 1-year lease after the city sold the property. And prior to that, part of the partnership arrangement we had with the city was we were occupying the space where the home store is in the Hagerstown Neighborhood Development Partnership since it was founded rent-free, and that in-kind rent was part of the city's support. Our annual budget's about $200,000 a year. Right now, it primarily consists of the home store, housing counseling activities, and assisting people with down payment assistance and credit counseling to become homeowners. In the past, though, we've been involved. We were founded and morphed from the Community Housing Resource Board to the Hagerstown Neighborhood Business Development Partnership in 2003-2005, and we currently serve as a 501c3 in the community's Community Development Corporation. And right now, our members of our board consist of a mix of folks that are low and moderate income or occupy those neighborhoods, community members, and then appointees by the mayor and council. So we'd like to continue the partnership. Right now, our budget's probably about a quarter city funded, 60% HUD or federal funding, about 40% state funding, and then the balance is user fees and private donated support.
I didn't hear you say county funding in there.
There's a little bit of county funding in there, but that's been fairly recent, and I appreciate the mayor and council's efforts in helping because we don't limit our counseling activities just within the city. So this past
In fact, more houses are purchased outside the city with help of HNDP than they are in the city.
That may be true more recently, but we have been getting some assistance from them. Part of the funding, it's certainly not the level of extent of the city's funding, since the city was a co-founder of the organization, but we are getting probably about $500 to $7,500 a year, $5,000 to $7,500 a year from the county in gaming commission monies or their community grants program. So we'd like to stabilize our location, enter into a 5-year lease, and some commitment from the city would be helpful to our board in helping to make that commitment and the redevelopment plans for the building next door.
So you say the county's contribution is how much?
They were right now this past year, I believe, about $5,000 from one source, and then 2,200, so just under 2,500 from gaming commission funds.
I know last year when this came up, because it kind of came quickly out of nowhere, which is why the city provided the additional subsidy so we could stay in that building for another year and come up with a funding plan. We had asked the county to also chip in money, and I don't remember if that.
We were getting some money, whether it's for this particular purpose, I can't tell you specifically because it's not listed that way on the financial statements. It's just showing the county's support. So, but that is a recent change because we weren't getting that in the past.
Because I know that was the intention originally, was to try to have them help subsidize as well, because we.
As a city.
Yes.
And that has not happened, apparently.
I'm
We're
not
getting
sure.
some subsidy there,
Something.
whether it's specifically for the rent or not, I don't know, Councilwoman.
I'm good with
kind of a short time frame. So, you know. But this is for another 12 months and it gets revisited again and,
Yeah.
This request is for a 5-year commitment, right?
is it for a 5-year commitment or is this for the next 12
We would
months?
prefer a 5-year commitment, but at least the 1-year commitment would give us some assurance, and then if we needed to scramble to find additional resources, that would give our board additional time to secure other sources.
I would just advise that in this last year of this administration, we don't decide to do something that is gonna saddle another administration for 4 years by a decision we make today.
Yeah, I'd be okay with the 12-month agreement. I think that's,
Me too.
Yeah, with a 12-month agreement, if we, as long as we can circle back around and come up with an optimum agreement between the city and county.
I also just would caution us. It's really easy right now to make these commitments, and we haven't started talking about our budget. And we make this commitment, somewhere along the line, we're gonna find $6,000 to cut. Because the deficit that we were told about last week is not in here. That's not funded in this.
this isn't in there.
All right, so,
No, that's okay.
so,
With the numbers that I came a couple weeks ago and shared, our total general fund agency contributions, where this would certainly come from, was at $284,600. And that did not include this additional $6,000 subsidy. It did include a small amount that we typically give, like $28,000.
so, I just would
Wait a minute,
caution
stop,
us.
wait a minute, we get how much?
It was decreased, I think, to $28,450 or
That we give
$28,540.
HNDP.
Yes, out of the general fund. And then
And the county
CDBG,
gives 5,000.
Right,
and that was new
out
as,
of gaming funds.
and it was a one-time arrangement, I think, and it happened exactly as
I
Councilmember
understand, yeah, I
Keller
remember that.
mentioned.
So
I'm old, but I remember that.
I would just suggest that we need to make sure our finances in order and who we're going to plan on cutting $6,000 from. Unless we're going to just have that much more of a deficit to overcome. And the only way I know that you overcome a deficit is either increasing revenue or cutting expenses. So I would just say that I think we ought to not give a commitment today, but wait a little bit until we see what our budget looks like. And I would also, I've said this many times before, and I'm gonna say it again, I've said it to other groups, and Al knows this. It's very frustrating to see an organization that is doing work for county residents that the city's funding. I don't understand it.
That's my point.
It makes no sense to me. We sit up there today and complain about differentials while we sit here and say, okay, let's fund another county effort that they won't fund. And when we talk about their funding, ask how much of it's coming from their general fund.
That's why it's
That's
not
still
in the budget.
30% of the city
Yeah.
taxpayers.
So I just think you ought to be real cautious. First of all, wait until we hear from Michelle and decide whether we can afford it.
Al, can you wait that long?
I don't know. We are right now dealing with the landlord on a lease renewal. We as a board need to make a decision as to how far we want to make a commitment to bind the organization. I think the landlord is anxious to, with their redevelopment plans on the upper floors, to secure and stabilize their first floor tenants in the property to maintain its, I'll just call it activity
when's
and
your lease?
viability.
When is your lease up?
I believe it's up March 1st, which is why we're dealing with this right now.
Well, and I would also certainly like to believe that the landlord would much prefer to have a month-to-month lease in empty space. I can't imagine that he's gonna, before he's gonna say he'll give you a month-to-month, that he's gonna evict you.
Yeah. Vicky couldn't be here this evening because of another work commitment. She is our part-time executive director. She did send me some information that right now the arrangements the landlord has proposed is maintaining the current rent, which we're currently paying at $750 a month for the upcoming year. and then doing a 3% escalator in each of the subsequent 4 years, which would have us paying a rent of around $844 at the end of year 5.
But your game plan, as I understand it, let's get it straight, is that your plan is to continue operating an organization without any rent expense? Forever?
Not forever.
Well, you rent $750, right?
Yes.
You want us to commit right now for 5 years and hoping that you can bridge the gap with the county with that for another 5 years. It's been going on now for a year, and I don't hear anywhere in the plan ever that HDMP has come up with a plan that will be self-supporting. And again, for what purpose? So city residents can support a county function? I don't understand it.
Well,
I don't hear a plan to say, I hear a plan that says, give us money for 5 years, not give us money for 2 years, and instead of hearing how we can decelerate our commitment, I'm hearing the rent's going to go up with no plan to even be able to make the current rent, without the support of a government who the majority of the work being done for is not being done for the citizens who are paying for it. And that's my whole problem. And I think it's a real easy thing, again, for the county just to assume we're going to continue doing what we're doing, just like we're going to continue doing with fire service and everything else. And I know how you wear two hats. I'm very aware of that. You've sat on this side of the fence and you know
I am,
where
and
I'm
I've sat
coming
in
from.
Michelle's shoes,
Right.
so I know certainly the
Yeah.
challenges. I will share our history. We were formed in 2003, a collaborative effort with founders at that time included Dick Phoebus, the executive director chief, Tom Newcomer, who was a private business person who had his business on the square at that time, and Reverend Robeson, the pastor of the Divine United Methodist Church. They were three founders and worked with the city council, mayor and council, and staff at that time with Rocky Wade and Herschel Lippo to create HNDP, which its purpose, and it continues to be, the city's Community Development Corporation, the 501c3. And probably the most notable thing that we were involved in, well, the two most notable things were the Baltimore Street project that didn't turn out successfully because of the collapse of the housing market. It did have a silver lining in the fact that it provided the parking for the library expansion and the Thomas Kennedy Memorial Site, and now the Massey property redevelopment. And the other big thing was being the owner of record and the pass-through entity to take the Barbara Ingram School for the Arts magnet school property from the city and to allow an $800,000 state historic tax credit to assist with the redevelopment of that school. So they're the two big, I'll just call it non-housing projects, along with other studies that to date have been useful, but we haven't really seen the results on those. But we continue to be there to support the housing program. As a board, we have scaled back our level of activity. We don't have a full-time executive director, realizing the fiscal constraints of where we are right now. We do stand ready to work with the city if the need for a more active community development corporation presence and a 501c3 is there. We're willing to do that.
Well,
And willing to work with the city as a key partner in whatever activities you have planned that might require that community development organization's assistance to leverage other funds.
Right, but everything you described as far as pass-throughs and everything, really don't need a $750 a month storefront. It requires a board of directors in the organization. I would suggest that I look at my fellow council members and I say, anybody have any idea what the Home Store HDMP has done on the last 12 months as far as relating to city residents? That's what I would like to know, is what percentage of this business is oriented towards city residents and what is oriented towards non-city residents? If it turns out that 75, 80% of this is city residents, that's one thing. But again, if it turns out what either Kristen or Bob said, that the majority of the home ownership that is being done is going to county residents, it seems the exact opposite of what we want to invest our money in.
When we had this conversation last year.
I know we did. We've had it more than just last year.
We got information from HNDP that showed that the majority of homes that they help the home buyers buy were in the county,
That's
not
my
the city of
reflection.
Hagerstown. Don't get me wrong, I firmly believe that we should help. I have no problem, but we help right now to the tune of $28,000 a year.
On our operating expenses.
Right. So, listen, the last thing I want to do is see them have to, shuffle to try to find someplace else to go. I don't think anybody wants that at this team. So I suggest that we go ahead and we fund it for a year. And then we work, or the next body works to get the county to step up and do the right thing and at least match what we do to help operating costs and those kind of things.
But the
And,
problem.
and I'll have to go, I'll have to go back through my email, because I had correspondence with the last executive director and people from the county over this, because when we gave the funding last year as a city, it was with the understanding that HNDP was going to figure out a way to fund it going forward, but we were in talks with the county about funding, so we had a change at executive director, and I'm not sure what happened from that point, but I can certainly go back and see who we were in contact with and what the story was at that time.
And the status of
With
it.
yeah.
And I apologize, I am not that intimately involved with, I know we've gotten the money from the county, I don't want to tell you here
I
publicly,
understand.
what it was
Well,
specifically.
Al, is there a possibility you could get mayor and council information between now and next Tuesday?
I can, because I'm on the board, I
Okay.
have it, I
Well,
just don't have
I
it with me.
understand, but I was,
Yeah, we can get you some
I want to
information.
saddle you with that.
We still created bigger deficit because it wasn't in the presentation that Michelle gave us.
Right,
So
we
it's
understand,
still-
but things in
right.
our
I mean,
presentation
still,
from
I don't,
2 weeks ago changed.
I mean, I don't-
Constant basis.
still not there.
I mean, I hear it wasn't in that, but it's odd that we would deliberate over 12 months of a $6,000 expense of, city and county
Spend half an hour on
responsibility.
foot.
And, well, not your fault.
Rightfully
And-
so, rightfully
and-
so, just like this.
And we're spending a $9 million sum, on our second largest department in the city that does the same thing every day.
They need the
Provides
numbers.
service to the county.
They need the numbers to understand.
So,
Well, I just want to share, on behalf of the HNDP board and the home store, we're very appreciative of the support the city gives us and the support you gave us to help us last year with the rent. And again, just from our fiduciary standpoint, we're trying to make sure that we're able to keep the storefront open, continue to provide that, I'll just call it retail presence on the street in downtown Hagerstown, and provide that housing counseling service in a very visible place. And quite frankly, we're in a neighborhood right now that is somewhat challenged from a perception
It needs a
standpoint.
good storefront, without a doubt.
So, but we appreciate your consideration, and any help you can provide would be helpful to us as a board in moving forward that commitment. We rely on that every month from our other supporters who primarily are private financial institutions. Citicorp's been a big supporter, as well as some of our other, I'll just call it more local financial institutions, as well as I said earlier, the HUD directly and the state government in their mortgage assistance programs. So thank you. So whatever consideration you can give us, we'd appreciate.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you, Al. City Minister.
Just city offices are closed on Monday for President's Day. Trash collection stays the same. And happy Valentine's Day. That's all for me.
Shelley.
Nothing tonight.
Luke.
Nothing tonight, Mayor, thanks.
Austin. Nothing. Roll, Kristen.
Can we do
Come on.
it?
All right, we are adjourned.
Hey!
Right at 6 o'clock.